Okay, the next item before us tonight is a detailed site plan number 20003, docket 20-11 for the Mill Branch Crossing Residential proposal for 408 multifamily apartment units and 190 townhouse dwelling units. Okay? So, staff, are you prepared to give us your presentation on this case?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Rogers. Again, Joe Meinert, for the record, Planning Director. This detailed site plan, DSP 20003, is for the Mill Branch site. This is for the residential portion only. The property is located at the northeast quadrant of US 301 and Mill Branch Road on a 70-acre property. This property was the subject of a preliminary plan of subdivision, which was approved about a year ago in 2021. I did want to point out, as part of our background information, that the City Council did review the preliminary plan in January of last year and conducted a hearing and unfortunately failed to pass a motion either for or against the preliminary plan. So that was some of the history of the property. We also wanted to note that the property was annexed into the city in April 2012. There is an annexation agreement that states that the city would support the pending and future applications of the annexation area in terms of, in accordance with the development plan that was proposed at the time, and any reasonable amendments to that plan as the city and the owner may agree. So here we are looking at a mixed-use plan. As part of our background information, we did point out that the zoning text amendment was supported by the city to allow residential uses within the CSC zone. That's the current zone. As of April 1st of this year, the countywide zoning map amendment is going to change the zoning throughout the county and will make residential uses permitted in the zone that this is intended to go into, which is the commercial general office zone. So this proposal's, slightly ahead of that, but is pretty much going to produce the same result as the zoning ordinance would encourage. The stakeholders meeting was held a week ago, February 1st. We provided the results of that in attachment 2 of the report. We did have a couple of stakeholders present for that virtual meeting. The detailed site plan in this case is proposing 408 multifamily apartment units and 190 townhouse dwelling units. The DSP includes the architecture for the multifamily, the clubhouse, as well as architecture proposed for several different builders, and I'm sure it will be discussed in the applicant's presentation, the type of architecture that is intended for the site. There's a statement of justification that is attachment 5, which covers the history and the requirements for approval. As with the previous case, there is really only one criterion for judging a detailed site plan, and that is from the county zoning ordinance. The planning board may approve a detailed site plan if it finds that this plan represents a reasonable alternative for satisfying the site design guidelines without requiring unreasonable costs and without detracting substantially from the utility of the proposed development for its intended use. And again, we've looked at this plan in relation to the zoning ordinance design guidelines as well as the city's own development review guidelines and policies. This site plan is a highly engineered plan, and we believe that the plan meets the letter of those regulations and standards. We did note that the development review guidelines of the city has a couple of policies that we feel are appropriate here, and those include the off-site tree mitigation policy that the city has, which is to try to locate that off-site mitigation within the same sub-watershed as the subject property, and that's something that we don't at this moment, at the time of the writing of the staff report, did not know exactly where the tree mitigation was intended to be located, and so we have a condition dealing with that. And then secondly, the design or development review guidelines address housing in neighborhoods on page 24, and states that workforce housing shall be provided in all new residential development and redevelopment within the Bowie local center. And if you'll recall, when the City Council reviewed the Bowie and Vicinity Master Plan update recently, it recommended a wider boundary for the local town center, which would include this property. So we feel that this recommendation is applicable to the site that's under review tonight. And so therefore, we would recommend a minimum of 10% of the dwelling units in the apartment section be provided as workforce housing units. So looking at this particular request that's before you tonight, we felt that those were the only two items, policy level, that we feel needed to be addressed through conditions of approval. I also wanted to mention that there's a companion case which is on your agenda next that relates to a departure from design standards for the size of the parking spaces in this section. And the requirement is to, or the request was to allow 9-foot by 18-foot parking spaces, and we'll address those items specifically in the next case. But we felt that this detailed site plan should be conditioned upon receiving the departure, allowing the smaller size spaces, or the applicant should provide revise the plan to provide spaces that would meet the county zoning ordinance requirements. So in summary, the staff recommends approval with the 3 conditions that you see on page 4, which I've just described, and that concludes the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Mr. Minor? Any questions for Mr. Minor? Mike?
Mr. Minor, can you elaborate on why the city council neither confirmed nor denied the applicant during their previous presentation?
They heard testimony from some of the stakeholders, and I believe some council members were in favor of supporting the preliminary plan, and some members were against approving the preliminary plan. And so I think we had 2 failed motions. We didn't have enough votes to pass a motion either way, and so the council did not have a position when the case went down to the county.
Thank you.
Joe, I just want to clarify, this particular project was basically overruled at the county level, is that correct?
I'm sorry, Mr. Stotz, I don't understand what you mean by overruled.
When it got to the county level, it was approved to go to this particular, where we're at now, correct?
Yes, the county planning board approved the preliminary plan of subdivision, which set the actual lots and the roads and the design of this site, and that was approved about a year ago.
Mr. Gallardo? Okay, Joe, let me clarify. You said that the proposed use of this site will conform with the proposed zoning rewrite of CGO?
From a use perspective, yes. I was describing the fact that the applicant had secured a text amendment approval which permits residential under the current CSC zoning, and that in the new ordinance, or the new zoning, which will take effect on April 1st, that will automatically be a permitted use. So you can do residential in the CGO zone.
Okay, so we're expecting that to be approved in April?
It is approved by the county council and it's effective on April 1st.
So it's already, okay, great, okay, good. All right, any further questions of staff? Hearing none, the applicant? Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Rogers, members of the Advisory Planning Board. Pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Edward Gibbs. I'm an attorney with offices in Largo. I've been before you on prior occasions, and of course, probably most recently in the spring of 2021 when this preliminary plan was approved. It was virtual, of course, at that point in time. So let me introduce a couple of people, if I might. And if you looked at our application, you would see that we listed two owners. One was GBR Mill Branch LLC, and the other was Green Branch LLC. Since the time of the filing of our detailed site plan application, Mr. William F. Chesley, who is the sole controlling owner of Green Branch LLC, has totally bought out the interests of GBR Mill Branch LLC. So as we sit here before you this evening, there is only one owner of the property, and that is Green Branch LLC, exclusively owned and controlled by Mr. William F. Chesley, who is present in the audience. Mr. Chesley has, vast, extensive experience in real estate development and construction and in the sale of real estate properties in Prince George's County. So he is well equipped to move this project forward alone. We also have with us this evening Ms. Kim Morgan of Land Tech, our civil engineer. She was really the driving force behind that massive 30-some page document that comprises our detailed site plan package. And Ms. Jackie Chandler, our transportation engineer. So we have sort of our full team here this evening to answer any questions that you might have. We're excited about this project. I'd like to give you a little bit of background and possibly also build on answering some of the questions that were raised initially after Mr. Meinert's presentation. So the property as it sits today is zoned CSC. The development that we're going forward with was authorized by a zoning text amendment. The CSC zone normally permits, for the most part, retail commercial uses. So CB 45 was adopted and approved by the district council in 2019. Now, bear in mind that the new zoning ordinance was adopted by the county council in October of 2018, pursuant to CB 13 of 2018. And that zoning ordinance created all the new zones and the regulations for development within those zones. So the CGO zone, Commercial General Office, was in existence at the time that CB 49 was adopted, but it could not be effective because the county had not been comprehensively rezoned to give new zoning classifications to all the properties. But when CB 45 was adopted, we knew that the CGO zone would continue to permit commercial retail uses, but significantly, it would permit multifamily residential at a density of 48 units per acre and residential townhomes at a density of 20 units per acre. So CB 45 has those identical development regulations for residential uses. It permits multifamily at 48 units per acre, and it permits residential townhomes at 20 units per acre. And so it was really a recognition on the part of the council that this property was going to be placed in the CGO zone, and the text amendment merely gave Mr. Chesley the opportunity to get started on the process a little bit sooner. So that's how it all falls in terms of conforming with the zoning ordinance and with CB 45. So the preliminary plan was approved, and this body recommended approval of the preliminary subdivision plan. We did go before the city council and had a lengthy hearing, and there were, if I recall correctly, two different motions. One motion was a motion to approve, and that was deadlocked because there was one council member who abstained. Then there was a second motion made by people who voted, there was, I think it was like 2-1, if I recall correctly. But the second motion was a motion to deny. That too failed because the same council member abstained a second time. So that's why we didn't get a clear motion from the city council. But it did go forward, and the planning board approved the preliminary subdivision plan, and it approved approximately 77,500 square feet of commercial uses, and the subdivision plan approved 408 multifamily residential uses and 190 residential townhomes. So the exact residential quantities that we're coming in with tonight were approved by you, actually recommended for approval by you, and were ultimately approved by the planning board when it approved the preliminary subdivision plan. So the density and the use type that we're proposing in this detailed site plan, which is the next step in the process, is exactly on point with what the planning board approved in the preliminary subdivision plan, which was approved in April of 2021. So here we are tonight, and we have our detailed site plan in front of us, and we have an illustrative plan up on the board. And I guess what I'd like to say about this is I want to talk about the layout generally, but I also want to focus on frontage and access at the start. So the property has frontage on US 301, which runs in a north-south direction and is at the top of the illustrative plan, of course. And then Mill Branch Road comes down along the southern boundary of the property, and you see that sort of on the left-hand side of the drawing. So Mill Branch Road comes down. We are going to, and proposing to build a traffic circle at a certain point in the along Mill Branch Road, where we will be able to direct our traffic around the circle and into the project. So the road that you see coming off of the traffic circle in generally I'd say a northeasterly direction, is going to be a private road that we will construct. It will be the development's responsibility to maintain that road, and that will be known as Ridgely Avenue. Off of that Ridgely Avenue, you will see a curving road where you would take a left off Ridgely to come into the project. And that is our main spine road for this development. It's called Lola Lane. It too is a private road exclusively to be maintained by the development. The areas that you see on the west side of Lola Lane and at the northern terminus of Lola Lane, the tan colored sections, those are all the commercial component of this development. We are not here with a detailed site plan on any of those yet, although they will be coming very shortly. But we just wanted to denote those in a tan color to show you where they'd be. So when you come around Lola Lane, immediately east of Lola Lane is the 408 multifamily units. And they consist of 6 buildings. Each building is U-shaped. There is surface parking sort of in the middle of the multifamily development, but a really unique feature of these buildings, each building is about 89,700 square feet. They're 4 stories in height, but a really unique feature of this development is the plan and the commitment to have underground garage parking in each and every building. It's a substantially significant investment from a financial perspective. Most multifamily developments that you see are exclusively surface parked because the developers want to sort of build the project without any more expense than is absolutely necessary. This developer, and by the way, the multifamily component is under a contract to a contract purchaser. It's a binding contract that Mr. Chesley has entered into. And they are going to put a 1 level of garage parking underground beneath each of the 6 buildings. The buildings themselves will be 4 stories in height. And then in the upper left-hand corner of the multifamily component, it's a little difficult to see on this drawing, but we're going to have a clubhouse there. And the clubhouse also is fairly extraordinary for a multifamily development because this clubhouse is going to be about 10,000, it's going to be 10,200 square feet, roughly, you know, it's definitely over 10,000 square feet. I think it's approximately 10,200. That is a very, very large clubhouse structure for a multifamily component. And within that clubhouse, you know, we're going to have a fitness center, which will include ellipticals, treadmills, stationary bicycles, weights. We're going to have a yoga center. We're going to have a community center. There will be conference rooms. There will be office space. There will be a library. It will be a general meeting place for the residents of the multifamily component. So it's extensive. And then there's quite a lovely swimming pool. Sort of, it's not circular, but it's certainly not rectangular. It's sort of a free-form shape that's going to come with the clubhouse. So the recreational amenities for the multifamily component are quite extensive. I'd like to, if we could, I'm going to need to come back to this drawing, but if we could move to just the architecture for the multifamily. Okay.
Okay, so you go this way for front, this way for back. So do you want to run it? Or
Just take me to the elevations for the multifamily. There we go. Okay, so this is a typical elevation for a multifamily building that you're seeing. So if you look at the elevation in the upper right-hand corner, you're looking at the front of the multifamily building where one is going to enter the building. And so you can see that attractive arched-shaped canopy supported by brick pillars. Everyone will enter through that entry there. The top of that roof is going to be standing seam metal. Then what you see in sort of, it looks like sort of a darker tan in this illustration, but all the dark tan areas are really red brick. And then the levels above that are comprised of horizontal siding and some ephes components. You can see substantial glazing throughout the entire building. There will be balconies for individual units. And then further architectural interest is provided by sort of articulating the face of the building so that it goes in and out a little bit. Gable treatments on the roof, and a 30-year asphalt shingle for the roofing component. If you look at what looks to be below grade there, you'll see in two of the elevations that is a gated entry into the garage area. So patrons or residents within the multifamily component are going to be able to enter into the garage there with a secured keypad system to gain entry. That's a metal door that will go up and allow access into the garage. So we're pretty excited really about the multifamily. Each building will have a mix of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units in each building. Each will have a mix. And the mix is really broken up. Obviously, as you can appreciate, there will be fewer 3-bedroom units in each building than there will be 1s and 2s. But there will be that mix to afford singles, young couples, and of course families with some children. So you'll have that mix in each building, which I think is quite nice. Where are you, Kim? Okay, so if you could go back, so that's pretty much the. Do you have the architecture for the clubhouse in there? Could you bring that up? There we go, right there. That's the clubhouse building itself, approximately 10,200 square feet. It carries forward basically the same. It carries forward the same building materials as the multifamily units themselves, a mixture of brick. I think this has cement paneled siding, And as you can see, tons of interest in the roof treatments, combination of steep pitch roofs and hip roof components on the building to provide a ton of architectural interest. So it's going to be really a beautiful multifamily project, and I know that Mr. Chesley's very happy with it, and the contract purchaser is very excited about gaining approval and being able to move forward. I'd like to go back, if I could, to just the illustrative so that I could go over the townhouses with you. There we go. So as you can see, all of the multifamily, the 6 U-shaped buildings are all clustered just east of Lola Lane. So if you look down sort of to the I call that area a reverse pyramid at the extreme eastern edge where we abut the Green Branch Regional Park. And that's the townhouse area. And the townhouse area also extends over to be that area just north of the multifamily component. Now, the townhouses can be accessed through the multifamily component or via a second access point off of Ridgely Avenue. And so each of the townhouses will be served by a private road, again maintained by the HOA once it is constructed. There will be a mix of front-loaded units and rear-loaded units. And we're pretty excited about the rear-loaded units in particular because it creates the opportunity for an entire different street frontage, because all you see on the front is the front door and windows, and a double garage, which is on the rear of the unit. The units will be 20 feet wide, 22 feet wide, and 24 feet wide. And that is extremely generous in terms of the widths of the units when you consider that many times you see townhouses and the interior units are 18 feet wide with 20 feet wide units on the ends. So, Kim, if you could go through the architecture for the townhomes. So here we have it. So we have basically the builders that we have architecture for: Stanley Martin, NVR, D.R. Horton, Lennar, and Dan Ryan. So all highly reputable residential townhome developers with a wealth of experience in Prince George's County. We don't know who exactly the builder of the residential townhomes is going to be. It's going to be one of those 5. It's possible it could maybe be 2 of the 5. But we'd like to go through the architecture. So as you can see on this first set of elevations, the intent is to present a traditional style of architecture, copious amounts of brick on the front, lots of glazing through the window patterns. The entrances are covered at the front door. This is the rear load unit that I was talking about, and it just creates a really pleasing frontage along the street, not cluttered by driveways going into garages. It's just a nice little option, and kind of unique, and I think it's going to look great here. Gables at the top of the roof, steep pitch roofs. Again, the 30-year asphalt guaranteed shingle. And if you could move on, Kim. And we'll just go through. These are the rear of the rear loaded units. Balconies on the rear. Again, the steep roof. Obviously not masonry on the rear of these units as you saw on the front, but still and nonetheless, very attractive with a double garage. Next one, sides of units, lots of windows to present so that you don't see just a face of siding. Here's the next one. And these are the various builders. Tell you the truth, I can't call out who's who here, but again, a traditional look, but a very different style, a mix of masonry, stone, tons of windows, As you can see, a very steep roof pitch with, again, gables and dormers articulating the roof surface itself. Moving on, Kim. This is just a series of different rears and sides for this same model type, which is called Delilah. This is the same builder, the Heartland model, I guess. Once again, earth tones, and here we've got the side treatments and rear treatments. Well, here's Lennar, which is labeled. Very similar to the first product that you saw. Certainly traditional, same roof styles, gables, tons of windows. These particular units, this particular drawing shows both the front and rear load unit types. So at the top, you'll see the front load with the garage, and the second set down shows the rear load. And I'm not sure which builder this is, but once again, sort of a lighter color palette, emphasizing white and gray, again with a mixture of masonry and horizontal siding. This is a photograph of an actual constructed unit from one of the builders, but again carrying forward the same general traditional style. And now we're back at the clubhouse. If you go back to the illustrative, Kim. Thank you. So when we talked about the multifamily, we talked about the recreational amenity that's going to be available for the multifamily units. And I want to emphasize that the recreational amenities for the multifamily are only available to the multifamily component. They're not available to the townhomes. But the townhomes do have their own recreational amenities. Within the development itself, there will be a large tot lot that will have age-appropriate amenities, which will include slides, riding, sort of toy-like swings, a very large gazebo for parents to sit and congregate and socialize. And then there will be a preteen lot, which will be geared for ages 5 to 12, and the amenities in there will be appropriate to the age. So there will be slides and rope climbs and just things that the older children can handle better, again, with a gazebo. But I think what's particularly appealing about the recreational amenity that's attached as part of the townhouse product is if you look to the right in that illustrative plan, you'll see a pond. That's a stormwater management pond. And what Mr. Chesley has decided to do is to heavily amenitize that stormwater pond. And so what we're doing is, because of the Green Branch Regional Park immediately to the east, and by the way, I'm informed by the Parks Department that they're finally at a stage where they want to start moving forward with that park development. So it appears that that's something that's going to be happening here. And so really, Park and Planning wasn't interested in mandatory dedication that much with the preliminary subdivision plan. And so what we elected to do was then provide private facilities in lieu of mandatory dedication. So that's why you see all these recreational amenities. But what Mr. Chesley decided to do with the stormwater pond is quite unique, and I think is going to be so well received by the community. So he has agreed to install a 10-foot wide asphalt path around the stormwater pond. And within that path around the pond, he is going to have gazebos. He's going to have benches. He's going to have some picnic tables. There are going to be grilling areas around the pond as well. And so the pond itself is going to be attractive, and the residents are going to have the opportunity to both exercise and congregate and socialize along this 10-foot asphalt path, have picnics up there. So I think it's going to be very well received and something that's really interesting for everyone. Two things that I haven't said yet that I think are really important. number one, the road that's coming in, Ridgely Avenue off of Mill Branch Road, so we are providing in that road an easement for the Parks Department to have access into the Green Branch Park. So patrons to the park are going to come into the park through that roadway. So that's a significant benefit that Mr. Chesley is bestowing there relative to the construction of that road. The second thing I want to mention, and I don't want to forget this, and that is, you may recall that when we presented the preliminary subdivision plan to you, there was a lot of conversation about a pedestrian crossing of US 301 at the Mill Branch Road intersection. And that is, you can kind of see it. First of all, number one, we're doing it. And you can see it there. It almost looks like a white line across the gray paving of 301, right there at the intersection of Mill Branch Road and 301. And so I just wanted everyone to know that we're providing that pedestrian crosswalk. There is a substantial grade difference in the median. And so we've provided a paved switchback so that when you get to the median, you're going to turn north and it's going to gradually slope down, and you're going to go for a distance, I don't know how many feet it is, and then you make a turn and come back to the south, again in the median, within the median, and it sort of gets you back down to grade so that you can make the crossing over the southbound lanes. So that is going to happen. It has been reviewed by the State Highway Administration. They've made a suggestion that maybe in addition to the switchback, we should have some steps in there. Some stairs in there for people who don't need the use of the ramp. And we're sort of negotiating with them on that. But overall, they certainly like the pedestrian crossing, and we are certainly providing it.
Excuse me, this is personal to me, that's why I got to ask you this question. Now, the way the road crosses Route 3, you just suggested that, right? You mentioned that. Route 301 is one of the most dangerous roads in this country. And I think somebody should come up with a way of easing in and out of your development with some kind of ramp. And the only reason why I say that is because last year, at an intersection not too far from there, exactly like that on Route 301, and a road where you said, I was making a left turn, head-on collision, almost killed me last year. You got to be careful with the traffic going in and out of your development, and you got to do something to make going in and out of there safer for the lives of people.
Yeah, well, you know, our traffic engineer is here, and she could answer any questions you might have in that regard. But I can tell you that the off-site improvements that my client is building and committed to build is in the range of $13 million. These are improvements to public roads. The Mill Branch southbound on 301, we're putting a second left turn lane in at that traffic signal to accommodate more traffic. But I mean, everything has been reviewed by the State Highway Administration. The design of all these road improvements has been reviewed and approved by the State Highway Administration. They meet all design criteria. I would also note that we have had approved, you'll see that second access up there to the north. That is coming into our project. It's a right-in, right-out off of US 301 to provide a second point of access so that we don't have so many people making turns at Mill Branch Road. And we think that'll certainly enhance safety. But, you know, Mr. Galato, I certainly understand your concerns, especially in this day and age when it appears that there are so many people who seem to be driving.
I gotta say, it's nice that they're doing that.
Limit.
It's nice that they're doing that extra stuff and they're going through quantitative analysis, but, you know, I'm just saying, you might want to do a little extra if you care about the people who are going to purchase your products.
And I'd be really interested to hear what you feel is a little extra, like what your recommendation.
I'm not an engineer, that's where they come into play.
Right, but you're talking about transportation safety, is that correct? Okay, point well taken, and Ms. Chandler's making notes right now, and so she's certainly going to look at that and confer with Mr. Chesley, but if there's anything further that can be done, I'm sure he's willing to do it. That really is the detailed site plan. I would say this, there are 3 conditions that staff has recommended. Obviously, condition 1 is that the departure for the size of the parking spaces, which you're going to hear immediately after this, is approved. And so that's certainly understood. The second is that we work with staff to attempt to identify some off-site tree mitigation that we're going to need. That's within the sub-basin here, and we agree to work with staff to, we have no problem with that condition. I will say this, though, that we don't have a problem doing that as long as it's available today. So sometimes if you want to create a tree bank, it takes months to get that done, to get it approved. And so we wouldn't be able to accept a condition that says you have to create one. But if there's one in existence, and it's competitively priced with, the market these days seems to be $22,000 to $25,000 an acre for trees, for off-site tree mitigation. So as long as somebody's not asking for $100,000, we're certainly committed to working with your staff to make condition number 2 happen. The third condition, which is the 10% workforce housing. So, first of all, let me just say this. I mentioned that the multifamily is already under contract and has been under contract for some time before this condition was ever made known to us. And so we cannot sit here tonight and say we willingly accept that condition. Because as I've explained the multifamily component to you, it has been designed and will be constructed at higher than normal construction costs. It was developed to be a market rate community. And so we're working with Mr. Minor. I had some questions for him about, what is workforce rates? And he gave me some information just today. We have sent that off to the contract purchaser. So we're somewhat, I just can't say we accept that condition tonight. I just can't. If we can, we hope we know that we can before the February 22nd hearing, before the mayor and council. But tonight, we just don't have that buy-in yet from the contract purchaser. Of course, he just got the numbers today of what, and I'm not even sure I understand the numbers that Mr. Minor sent to me. We're going to have to confer with him and perhaps other members of the staff here at the city to try to fully understand what those rates will be for 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. But we certainly agree that the objective is laudatory. It's just a question of whether the project can accommodate it at this point. It's a lot easier if you know up front that this is going to be something that you're going to be dealing with. And of course, one could say, well, hey, you go read the guidelines and policies of the city if you want. Yeah, you're probably right, but probably not everybody does. So we just can't accept that. We can't say tonight we accept that condition. It's certainly your prerogative to add it, obviously, with your recommendation. But we would ask you to consider the fact that we have a really nice multifamily component that was developed and is committed for construction as a market rate. So we thank you very much for your attention. I know our presentation was a little bit long, but hopefully it was helped you understand better what we're trying to do. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. Questions? No questions? Just as a matter of just setting a marker, what are the average 1, 2, 3-bedroom rental rates in this market?
I don't know, first of all, I can't provide that number. I saw my client sort of shrug his shoulders. He can't provide that number either. He's not going to do the multifamily development himself. But I can tell you this, I represent several multifamily builders and developers, and the rent structure differs based upon what type of unit you're providing, and what the amenities are, and what the construction standards within the building. I mean, when you have structured parking like this beneath the building, it demands a higher rental rate in order to pay for it. So, when you have a 10,000 square foot clubhouse, it demands a higher rental rate to carry what it costs to build that. So it just depends. It really just depends.
Staff, Mr. Minor, do you have any idea what the rates might be in Bowie? I mean, we just had Bowen, is that what it's called, Bowen, over by the senior citizens building? That's about 10 years, about what, 5 to 8 years old? 10 years, maybe, I don't know.
To answer your question, Mr. Chairman, I do not know. I know our Economic Development Office does periodically survey the apartment projects and provides that information, but I don't know the information tonight.
Just to piggyback on that question, if you're saying you do not agree with the third recommendation for 10% multifamily properties to be for workforce, that is based upon what? If you're saying you don't know what your rental rate's going to be or your sale rate, then how are you saying now that you're not sure if you can accommodate the 10%?
Well, first of all, okay, we didn't have any idea what the expected rental rate might be for workforce housing until today. Okay? I asked Mr. Minor, and we talked about it last week. And look, I'm not criticizing Mr. Minor because this is new ground. But I said to him last week, I said, Mr. Minor, I see the formula that you have here to determine who would qualify as a workforce person or family, okay? There is a formula in your guidelines for that, but I said, what's the rental rate? And he told me, quite candidly, I don't know. And so today, he sent me a set of HUD guidelines for fair market rentals. But I don't understand it. There's a formula, and we're going to have to get together and do it. But if this developer, the contract purchaser of the multifamily, if he, it's unfortunate, he's in New York, and it's unfortunate he's not with us tonight. But if you're built, it's the same reason why people, when they're building multifamily, they usually don't want to go above 4 floors, because then they have to change from frame construction to steel and concrete, and everything. What you have to pay to build your product dictates what you rent the units for. That is purely and simply the way it is, and that's why the more you heavy up on the amenities and the construction, the higher the rent has to be, simply to carry the debt service on the loan. I mean, it's just the way it is. Now, what his actual number is here, we're working to get all that information from him, but I can't say. First of all, I don't know tonight what the expectation of the city is for workforce rental rates. We're going to work with Mr. Minor. We're going to try and find out exactly what that is. But getting this information, this morning, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, whatever it was, and then looking at it and not really understanding it, with all due respect to Mr. Minor, because he's doing his best, but it's not, we're not in a fair position to even evaluate it.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Scopes?
Mr. Gibbs, I had the same issue. Joe, nothing against you, but to put a required condition on something where everything is nebulous it's crazy. I think that what we can do to move the project along, though, instead of saying a minimum of 10%, okay, we basically say a goal. Just insert the word goal, GOAL, will be sufficient that it is a concern. But to put a condition like this, it just doesn't make sense. I'm sorry.
I believe that there was some point in time we had this discussion when we were having a hearing related to the redevelopment of the Sears property. And we talked about a certain percentage being set aside for workforce housing. Did we ever come up with a number there?
Mr. Chairman, that recommendation that came from the city was discussed at the county level and was actually made a condition of the county's approval of that basic plan amendment for the Sears redevelopment, but the condition simply stated that it would be looked at a later stage. So we haven't gotten to that stage with that project, but I mean, to Mr. Gibbs' point, it was raised early enough in the process that it sort of is in everyone's line of sight to be taken up later. So, you know, if you look at that as a precedent, yes, it's, this is the first time that it's coming up on this project.
If I could just address that, my understanding, like Mr. Minert said, is that at Bowie Newtown Center on the Sears conversion, again, that condition just says, look at this going forward. There's no commitment or no requirement as to any percentage in that, because that was, and the beauty of that one is that you caught it at a very early stage. They were in for a conceptual site plan, and so you're just at the beginning of the whole effort, and so you can gear your construction for those type, to add those type units in. But again, that's not a hard and fast condition of any percentage that they have to give. It's something that's going to be negotiated or looked at as you go forward. The other thing I would say about this condition is that it's, with all due respect, and I do have a ton of respect for Mr. Minert, the wording of the condition is actually, quite frankly, it's not legal. Because the condition is worded in such a way that the applicant has to enter into an agreement to do this before any building permit can be signed off on by the city. And this is not a law, this is not an ordinance requirement even in the city. It's a policy and a guideline. So there's just tons of things about this issue right now that we're not prepared to deal with. But we do want to work with Mr. Minert as we move forward to February 22nd and get a better understanding of where we are. But again, that's why we cannot accept this condition tonight. But we really appreciate his recommendation of approval of the site plan. Thank you very much.
So, real quick, Counselor. So you have been before the city council and came away with either deny nor confirm vote. So what was some of the hiccups that they foresaw within your plan as to reason why they couldn't grant you approval?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, at the time,
And then, excuse me for interrupting, but then those hiccups, what have you done, and Mr. Chelsea and the rest of your team, what have you guys done to mitigate some of those obstacles that they brought up?
right. I think one of the big issues at the preliminary plan stage was this pedestrian crossing of 301. That was a really big issue. We were not in agreement with that at that time because we thought it was a safety problem. And we thought it was a safety problem not just because of the volumes on 301, because there is a pedestrian crossing, I think, up at Ballpark Road, a little bit to the north. But at this particular location, there is about an 8 to 10 foot grade difference when you when you go out there, if you're going southbound on 301, you want to take a left on Mill Branch, when that light turns green, you got to go up a hill. And so we were really concerned about safety, and so we opposed that. That was a big item of discussion and disagreement, because almost every citizen who testified at that hearing before the city council wanted that pedestrian crossing. Also, residents from, I think it's Mill Branch Estates, there were just some concern about the fact that this is a new development that's going to have multifamily and townhomes and, you know, normal traffic concerns and things of that nature. But I mean, from our perspective, you know, we're doing the crosswalk, and you know, for what we're doing, you know, Mr. Chesley proffered that when he did his traffic study for the preliminary subdivision plan, he would include all of the traffic that would be expected to be developed from the Green Branch Regional Park, even though there was no plan for when that would ever happen. But he accepted all those trips as part of his development, and 22% of all the trips in his traffic study are allocated to trips in Green Branch Regional Park. And that translates directly into the level of improvements that he has to make, those $13 million of improvements. So, and again, the design of the traffic circle intended to minimize speed on Mill Branch Road. You know, I think those are all things that he has done. You know, building the road down to the park. I mean, he has taken every step that he can to be a good neighbor and a solid developer. Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone signed up to speak?
No, Mr. Chairman, there is no one signed up to speak.
It's been held and closed. Mr. Gallardo,
No questions.
discussion?
No.
Mr. Scopes?
Yeah. Joe, I'm going to go back to condition 3. You know, if this was normal times and there wasn't such fluctuation, the cost of goods or supply chain, the whole 9 yards. Again, the goal is noble for the workforce housing, and I support that 100%. But again, you know, a goal of a maximum of 10%. Because what's going to happen is we're going to go through, we're going to turn this thing down. City council, of course, is going to probably turn it down for political reasons. And then it's going to go down to Marlboro and it's going to be approved. That's why I think the insertion of that language at least doesn't pin down the developer. You know, like Mr. Gibbs said,
So, Mr.
agreements have to be signed. And when you put an agreement forth, you have to have data to support why the recommendation should be or not be. And, you know, I'm sorry, Joe, because, you know, nothing against you and your office, because you guys know that I put you guys on a pedestal, but I really think the condition 3 is,
So,
you
Mr.
know,
Scopes,
as worded.
So, Mr. Scopes, I think that should be a discussion among the board here.
Yeah.
Then there could be a recommendation.
That's.
I mean, if that's what your wish is,
Yes,
that, you know, we could make a recommendation to staff's report.
okay.
So, do you have, no. So is that
Yes, that's
so is that something that we as
basically
the,
a recommendation of
deliberate
inserting that
among
language.
us, that we incorporate the word goal into the recommendation?
I agree with Mr. Scopes.
You agree?
I agree.
Agree? Okay.
Same goal.
Make a public statement.
Let's deal with this issue.
Okay, yeah.
Let's dispose of this issue. So, Mr. Minor, I think what I'm hearing here is that the board wishes to make a recommendation that there be an addition or a change in language to condition number 3, that instead of saying that it's that we're asking the developer to agree, we're just asking that it be a goal inserted, and you can restate you can restate how you would like that stated.
Okay. No, okay. Yeah, I'd like to make a recommendation, Mr. Chair, that we strike the word minimum and we insert goal of. And, you know, I don't think a maximum of 10%, you know, I've got that plain as well, but, you know, a goal of 10%, it's basically maximizing it, but if you put minimums and maximums, that's really dangerous language.
Okay. Is that acceptable, Mr. Minor?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the board is free to do whatever it wants to do, and we will advance that recommendation as part of your report. The only thing I wanted to say in response to Mr. Scoats and what was said earlier is that by staff bringing this condition up now, this is the first opportunity that we've had since the City Council included this particular item in their development review policies when they updated them last March. And so this project, we would not have been able to make the recommendation at the time of preliminary plan in January. So it was something new that the council wanted to add. They believe that the city should be trying to get developers to contribute to the regional issue, you know, as all of the levels of government are trying to do to address the housing issue in the metropolitan area. So it's something that came directly from the council and the development guidelines. I don't have any problem with the board making a recommendation of your own to the council, and we may, as staff, go back and reconsider how we've written this when we write our amendment to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. Okay.
Yeah, Joe, I was just going to say, like I said, I'm 100% supportive of the intent. And again, I'm not trying to, you know, cause any controversy whatsoever. But if there was empirical data that supported a definite, you know, saying a definite rather than a goal of,
Okay.
you know, it'd be a different story.
Right. Going to work on that. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Scoats. You had a public remark you wanted to make? You said you wanted to make a remark?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. Having said that, need a motion?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve detailed site plan DSP 20003 with the amended language in condition 3, striking the word minimum and inserting the word goal.
Okay. All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, motion has been properly made and seconded. Are you ready for the question? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion carries.